Welcome to the Fabulous 413. I'm Khalees Smith.
And I'm Monty Belmonte. Later in the show, Executive Director for Rachel's Table, Jody Falk, talks with us about this weekend's Outrun Hunger fundraiser.
And Mr. Universe Salman Hamid talks about UFOs, or a lack thereof.
But first, we're going to bum you out, maybe.
Because last week, the Supreme Court handed down a decision that further eviscerated the Voting Rights Act.
And may have even further repercussions.
So to process all that might mean, we bring local expert in all things John Roberts down from the hill towns to help us navigate the ruling.
What would you like us to use as a bleep out noise for your book title this time?
John Roberts must have said something.
Anything out of the mouth of John Roberts?
Anything out of the mouth of John Roberts, yeah.
Well, it does come with the territory.
There you go.
So anyhow, back to the real uplifting idea of the gutting of the Voting Rights Act.
Yeah.
It's easier to think about how our voting rights are being taken away than the fact that we're gonna face some sort of famine-y starvation thing.
It's Monday. Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. A recent headline from Salon reads, SCOTUS just unleashed a gerrymandering dragon. The court's 6-3 decision gutting the Voting Rights Act will reshape the nation's political map in dramatic fashion.
A recent Guardian headline reads, the Supreme Court's voting rights decision wasn't about law, it was about politics. This court has impaled one of the most important laws in American history with disastrous consequences for multiracial democracy.
And a recent headline from Slate, the Supreme Court's death blow against voting rights is the culmination of John Roberts' 50-year crusade. Beginning with his first job in the Reagan Justice Department, the Chief Justice has been hell-bent on dismantling the Voting Rights Act.
All of these headlines come from stories written by Haydenville's David Daly. David is the author of the national bestseller Rat, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count, which helped spark a drive to reform gerrymandering.
I did a great job. Solve that.
Well, the problem with addressing an issue of this nature and making it public so that everybody knows is that everybody then knows, and they all come to their own solutions, some of which we saw through this.
We've addressed gerrymandering, just maybe not in the way that you had anticipated.
Oh, yeah. He regularly discusses democracy and voting rights in The New Yorker, The New York Times, The Washington Post, The Atlantic, and on CNN, MSNBC.
Yeah, we call it MS Now.
MS Now?
Yeah.
NPR, and here with us on NEPM.
He's the former editor-in-chief of Salon. His most recent book is called Anti-Democratic, Inside the Far Right's 50-Year Plot to Control American Elections. It's in some way the sequel to Rat,
A Dissent.
And it now reads like a prescient playbook for what the Supreme Court has now accomplished.
It is a brilliant work of horror. Good job, sir.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's not your fault. And we welcome David Daly from Haydenville back to the Fabulous 413. And we gave a little rundown right there of some of the recent decisions that have brought you back on our show. But let's talk about, I've only read about it actually. Is it Calais? Are they saying it in the French way? Or are they saying callous, which is the mispronunciation of our co-host's name?
Well, I think it is pronounced Calais,
Okay.
but the decision itself is callous.
Dislike.
And what I think people
Dislike.
also miss is that Mr. Calais, who was a person, was also one of the rebellious folks at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
So this is from The Guardian.
It's
Calais
as if
versus
this was all
Louisiana.
planned.
Based on politics, not law, the U.S. Supreme Court, in effect, erased the remaining provision of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Talk about these landmark decisions and what they have done, like dominoes falling, really.
Really, you can trace this back a dozen or so years. The Roberts Court's first whack at the Voting Rights Act came with the Shelby County case back in 2013, which put an end to preclearance, which was the most effective enforcement mechanism of the Voting Rights Act. It required states that had been the most stubborn and the most resistant to a full participation in American democracy to run any changes they wanted to make to their voting laws past either the Department of Justice or a court in Washington, D.C. to prove that they did not have racial intent behind them. John Roberts in 2013 said, we don't need to do that anymore because things have changed in the South. That very afternoon is when Texas introduced its draconian voter ID bill that they had already researched and knew that it required a form of voter ID that somewhere between 600,000 and 700,000 Latino citizens in Texas lacked. So things had evidently not changed all that much in the South. But in that decision, the court assured us that we did not need a preclearance any longer because there would still be Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which applied nationwide.
Until now.
And then they went to work systematically going after Section 2.
So does that mean that you need to bring preclearance back? Because now we don't have Section 2, which was the whole caveat of the first case. Does that mean that we should maybe fight to bring preclearance back? Not that it'll pass with the Roberts Court, but...
We should fight to bring back the entirety of the Voting Rights Act. This court has step by step worked to erase it. And what this court has done, and what John Roberts in particular has done, this is the culmination of a lifelong effort. I mean, imagine being somebody who gets up in the morning for the last 50 years and says, how can I destroy the Voting Rights Act today? That is what the Chief Justice has done. And in the new Slate piece, I talk about how the Chief Justice grew up in an Indiana town that was designed for whites only.
Yeah.
He went to a high school that was essentially created in the days after Brown versus Board of Education, designed to be another all-white school for wealthy sons of Chicago area entrepreneurs and gazillionaires, goes off to Washington, D.C., where he clerks for Justice William Rehnquist, who not a lot of people know this, but it comes out in Rehnquist's confirmation hearings to the court in the 1970s that Rehnquist personally worked to suppress Black and Latino voters in Arizona back in the 1950s and 1960s. So he learns all of this at the foot of a master, and he becomes very adept and very subtle, not at doing the kind of work that later Chief Justice Rehnquist was doing, but at couching his assault on the Voting Rights Act in these terms of a colorblind constitution or, race-neutral principles, except for the fact that every single time he drops one of these decisions, the consequences ripple out in such a way that just make it clear that that is not the America that we are living in. Right? It only takes a matter of hours after the Calais decision comes down for Alabama, Louisiana, South Carolina, Mississippi, Tennessee to start talking and taking action towards remapping congressional districts that slice and dice districts that had been held by Black Democrats, that had been created to assure Black representation. And now you take a city like Memphis, and they have whacked it in three. They have stretched it hundreds of miles across Tennessee. This district that has been a Black majority district since the 1930s is now going to be three districts represented by three white conservative Republicans.
We're speaking with Haydenville's David Daly, who has written two fantastic books about gerrymandering and its impacts. And by fantastic, we mean horrifying and now true works of what were formerly speculative fiction and are now U.S. history.
I'm not sure if they were ever speculative fiction, and maybe I'm just saying that from the general pessimism of having grown up a queer Black woman in America. But can we talk about how the societal value of one drop has kind of been pervasive in this? The idea that clearly we're not racist anymore because these laws were on the books, but they're not on the books anymore, which means you're racist now by that logic. But this has come up in other avenues too, where like the idea of having one makes it enough. With representation, that has been the standard that we kind of have been going by. Tennessee had one Black rep, and that was too much, apparently. And you get like pictures of organizations with their like one Black representative, their one female representative, their one Latino, their one of something. And that's the diversity.
Right.
And this seems to be the guiding principle, or at least part of the guiding principle for people thinking that racism has been eradicated. Can you talk a little bit about how pervasive that ends up being in legislation?
I think that's exactly right. When you look at this Calais case, what it has done is it's taken the very idea of equal justice and representation promised by the Reconstruction Amendments to the Constitution, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th that were passed after the Civil War, and really turned them on their head. That is because what the Reconstruction amendments in the Voting Rights Act did was they assured that there would be representation for communities of color as long as they lived someplace with appropriate numbers, that they lived in a compact community, and that there was still a history of racialized voting in the state. So you take a state like Alabama or Louisiana, both of which are essentially 1/3 black. And what the Voting Rights Act allowed for was the creation of majority-minority districts that assured some representation actually equal to numbers. And the Calais case argues and finds that simply allowing for that possibility of representation equal to one's numbers is in fact discriminatory against the white citizens of Louisiana, who evidently deserve to be represented from all 6 of those districts. So the court is essentially turning the very purpose and meaning of the Reconstruction Amendments on its head.
In the Guardian piece that you wrote, David Daly, there's a quote that says, "It's almost as if these outcomes were desired," exemplified by this quote from an earlier Thomas dissent of all justices, saying, "Perhaps an acceptable system is one in which the minority simply cannot elect its preferred candidates. It is, after all, a minority."
Yeah, Thomas, that's you.
I mean, the irony is not lost on me, but talk about that perception and how it makes its way to the Supreme Court and why, in your estimation, that is not a correct assessment of how things should be going forward.
Well, I think all you have to do is look at the real-life consequences of these decisions. The very moment that Calais arrives, you take a city like Memphis and you break it apart, and suddenly a community that has long had the chance to represent itself with a member of its own choosing is going to be cracked and sliced and diced across all of these districts where its voice will simply not be heard. This is going to come next to Alabama, where there have been of late 2 of 6 districts that have been represented by black Democrats. We are about to see a very creative map drawn down there that is going to take Birmingham and Montgomery and the Black Belt counties and divide them into small, little strands and attach them onto larger, redder, rural swaths of the state. And that's what we're going to see everywhere. This is going to go after as many as 19 congressional districts that are currently held by black or Latino members, all of them Democrats, and all of those seats are likely headed into the control of the Republican Party. So it is a catastrophe for black and Latino political representation. It is also a massive reallocation of political power from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. But it's going to reverberate as well in state legislatures. It's going to reverberate on local school boards and town councils and judicial races and all of the places where the Voting Rights Act has worked so heroically over the last 60 years and almost invisibly. And these have been some of the most important cases because they happen so far away from the national spotlight. We will all be talking about the importance of what has happened to the race for Congress and the midterms, but there are going to be small towns in Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana where Section 2 has ensured that local councils haven't been divided up the exact same way, sliced and diced, that school boards haven't been sliced and diced. This is going to affect people at a massive level that we have not even begun to grapple with.
You have said in these articles as well that this is essentially going to create a solid South for Republicans, but that Democrats could get all 52 seats in California. So this is a couple weeks ago, it seemed Democrats were saying, we've got a victory. They wanted to start this gerrymandering battle, but we've won it. Talk about how this most recent decision has now once again flipped the balance, and is it ever flip backable for Democrats?
The political consequences of this are huge, and it's going to affect everybody nationwide. Republicans are going to pick up probably 19 seats out of the South simply because of this decision. They will take some of them in 2026. They'll come back and they'll take more in 2028. It's too late for them to do anything in Georgia, anything additional in Texas this year.
It's too late for South Carolina to technically, I
they
think.
may find a way to go for it, but I believe they'll probably wait until 28 on the South Carolina seat. The entire mid-decade redistricting battle really began last summer when Donald Trump called Texas and said, give me 5 more seats. The Texas 5 seats were negated by the 5 seats in California that voters approved there in November. Republicans went on and took 4 additional seats, Missouri, North Carolina, 2 in Ohio. Democrats countered last month with an initiative in Virginia that was designed to even the score. On Friday, Virginia's state Supreme Court overturned that decision. So the midterm redistricting map stood at +4 there. Florida has already acted post-Calais. There's an additional 3 or 4 seats there, which takes you up to 8. And then you see 2 in Louisiana, 2 in Alabama. If they go any further in Tennessee, right? So you begin to see you're looking at 13 or 14 seats for the Republicans to be up this year, in addition to the 3 that they already have a majority in the House by. Mm-hmm. So Democrats are going to have to do an awful lot of flipping if they want to take control of the House in 2026. On midterms that looked like it would be a slam dunk a couple of weeks ago now is much more in doubt. Democrats will be able to fight back a little bit more ahead of 2028. They will draw a new map in New York that gives them additional seats. They will probably work to unwind the independent commission in Colorado. There's 4 seats there. If they try again in California, they could look to run the table and turn a 48-4 map into 52-0. Republicans won't stop there, though. They'll keep going in Kansas, in Kentucky, maybe even in New Hampshire if they hold a trifecta there. They'll go back to Indiana, where Donald Trump's preferred candidates, those who said no to his gerrymander efforts this year, all lost primaries. There will be an additional 2 seats there. What we're looking at is going to be a gerrymandering Armageddon across blue and red states that turns us into solid blue states in Democratic places, solid red states across the South. We've had this in America once before. Back then, we called it the Confederacy and the Union.
Well, that's fun.
If we're getting full on down this rabbit hole of potential fallout, what do these decisions end up meaning for the makeup of the current Supreme Court, which does currently have both black people and women on it? The gerrymandering isn't necessarily just about race. It is definitely also about gender. It is definitely also about gendered politics. Once this hurdle is overcome, what is the next thing that they tackle to dismantle?
Well, I think that's right. I mean, I think there has been both partisan gerrymandering and racial gerrymandering going on. They have collided. And the consequences of this is going to be a House full of uncompetitive districts. And in 2024, you had 37 of 435 districts that were within 5 percentage points. About 15 of those seats have been taken off the board already this year. More will come off in 2028. When that happens, what that means is that the primary in all of these elections becomes the most important race. Those tend to be won by the most extreme candidate. These are, low turnout, base-driven affairs. So this is going to dramatically push our politics further towards extremes. This is bad for representation. It's bad for, getting things done. And this court knows it. This court has an agenda. This court has a political project. And the conservative political project is all about winning victories through the courts that could not be won at the ballot box. And John Roberts has been the master of this. We have talked here before about how he is less the Chief Justice of the United States than he is the most important Republican political operative of the last 50 years, because he's delivered victory after victory, not just on voting rights, right, but on campaign finance reform, on reproductive rights, on the environment, on the regulatory state, on health care, on gun control, on whether or not the president can be a king with immunity for his decisions that has done so much to enable the absolute worst of this current administration. That is what this court has unleashed and will continue to unleash. It's a robed super legislature that will likely hold its positions and its conservative majority well into the 2050s. The conservatives on this court, the liberals as well, but when you retire from this court, you can time it so that you can be replaced by a president of your own political party, which Republicans have had a majority of the justices appointed on the Supreme Court going back to 1970. That's almost 56 years. It's a long time. The Chief Justice continues to tell us that they're just calling balls and strikes. They're not doing, politics at all. But it is more and more obvious to more and more Americans that this court has to be reformed. It has to be enlarged. The idea that 9 people can act as a super legislature appointed for life with no ethics code, with no term limits, with no review over the decisions that they hand down is fundamentally antithetical to representative democracy, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, or somewhere else in between. And we have got to get control of this court's jurisdiction, of its size, and bring it back to heel. This court is an enemy of democracy, and until we fix it, we will not have a democracy.
But with the decisions that have been made, implementing any of those changes seems as if it would double down on what is currently happening, much like in the way that Obama was held off from basically making 3 appointments to the court. And that, as you mentioned, was done deliberately. Putting in any sort of term limit or oversight at present basically ensures the same thing, at least for now, happening because they're currently in control.
None of this is easy. Although, Democrats are going to have one shot at this.
When is that shot? Is it this November?
No,
it's
when is
28.
If they can take a trifecta in 2028, in those first 100 days, they're going to have to come through with a big reform package because the U.S. Senate is a huge piece of this, right?
Right.
The Senate is extremely malapportioned. 15 states have 70% of Americans, but 30 senators. Until you add states, you will not come close to a Senate that adequately represents Americans, and you will make it very difficult to even confirm a Supreme Court justice, as Barack Obama and Merrick Garland learned back in 2016. We need to be thinking about a much more proportional U.S. House that actually elects delegations that look like and reflect the politics of every single state. We need to be thinking about how we bring an arrogant court that is hijacked and out of control and captured back to heel. And this has to be done before the 2030 census because, believe it or not, all of this can get worse. Because in 2030, we don't just redistrict after the census, we reapportion the states in the U.S. House.
Yep.
And reapportionment is a looming time bomb for Democrats because so many of these House seats are going to move from shrinking California and New York and Minnesota and Illinois and Pennsylvania and Rhode Island, and they're going to Texas, to Florida, to Arizona, to North Carolina. These seats are going from states that Democrats currently draw to states that Republicans draw. Electoral college votes will move with each of those House seats. So the map for Democrats in 2032 is going to be tougher. They're going to have to win more and different states in 2032 than they would have to in 24 and in 28. So the window to fix this has to be a trifecta in 28 and big, dramatic reform passed quickly.
What if the Democrats don't have major victories in this November's election? What do you anticipate will happen between 26 and 28? David Daley from Haydenville, who's written 2 books about the impacts of gerrymandering, both of which have fully come true now.
I think they will continue to try to lock down all of the power that they possibly can. We are watching this unfold in state after state. These people mean business, right? John Roberts is trying to convince the American people right now that we're not doing politics or power. We're just doing law. And he's saying this, right, at the exact moment that all of these states are carving up districts. He's saying this at the time in which Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett are going on Fox News and talking about conservative lawyers need to hold on to their convictions, right? He's saying this in the days after Cinco de Mayo, in which Brett Kavanaugh was probably at some suburban Maryland Applebee's complaining about Bad Bunny in the Super Bowl into his third, Margarona. And we have to have the belief of our own eyes. We can see what this court is doing. John Roberts is trying to spin us the same way he tried to spin Americans that he was simply calling balls and strikes. We're not having it anymore. Back in 2009, Roberts said, the American people simply have to realize that we are not a political branch of government, and if they don't like what we're doing, that's just too bad. Well, this is going to be the moment that all of us have to stand up to John Roberts and say, actually, this court is not a robed supermajority. You still do work for us, and we are going to take it back.
The irony, of course, being that, the legislation that they're taking apart didn't come through political means. It came through the courts. Those decisions had to be taken to courts in order to be enacted because political action wasn't moving the ball fast enough or at all. Because in those places where, it was most egregious, you didn't have black representation. You definitely had black activists and activists of all color dying trying to get people to vote. Just to paint even more of a picture, some people might say, why didn't they take this apart all at once instead of kind of brick by bricking it years, decades apart to try and really truly undermine what the Voting Rights Act does and did?
Because the Voting Rights Act is very popular, and taking it apart piece by piece is easier than overturning it at once. It's more palatable politically. If they had simply
But they did it with Roe v. Wade.
Over 50 years.
Fair.
If they had simply ripped up the Voting Rights Act, it would have sparked a political outcry. This is why, after all, back in 2006, when it was reauthorized for 25 years under a Republican Congress and a Republican president, it was largely unanimous, with 98-0 in the Senate, 390-33 in the House, signed into law with a jubilant President George W. Bush next to Jesse Jackson in the Rose Garden, right? But at the same time, they were appointing Alito and Roberts to the court. They knew that they could not do a frontal attack on the Voting Rights Act. It would be like going after the flag and apple pie. But if you could do it quietly, technically, legally, with a master tactician like Roberts doing it in pieces, you could eventually get where you wanted to go.
David Daley from Haydenville, the author of Anti-Democratic Inside the Far Right's 50-Year Plot to Control American Elections, and Rat
The problem
before that about the impacts of gerrymandering. This has been a very depressing conversation, obviously. It's been very depressing for people who believe in fairness and equality, and as you say many times in many of these articles, a multiracial democracy, which is seemingly becoming eradicated because of the impact of the Supreme Court decisions. You're also a big music fan. What music are you excited about seeing this summer?
Well, we've got a pretty terrific Solid Sound Festival coming up. I know that there's some exciting news here about Billy Bragg and Wilco.
Yes.
So that is
more to come on the air about that.
Pretty fantastic. Lots of great things there. Lots of great things with Spoon and the Beths out at Green River and Rat Boys. So there is all sorts of terrific stuff happening. Festival season. Let's go.
Yeah, there's still some hope and light in the world.
Well, until they won't let the black musicians tour or the women musicians tour without having an entourage of people for their safety. And we won't get into the fact that those people who are there for their safety could possibly assault them and they'd have no recourse. But anyhow, when do we get to admit that the American democracy experiment has failed?
I'm pretty much ready. Meet you at Applebee's.
Awesome.
David Daley from Haydenville, thanks so much for coming in.
Anytime, guys.
We can't leave you that bummed out, so we'll explore how we're fighting hunger in Western Mass and beyond with Jody Falk and learn about their Outrun Hunger event from Rachel's Table this Saturday.
And next, UAPs uncovered in recently released files and how unlikely they are with Mr. Universe Salman Hamid.
You're listening to The Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
The Fabulous 413 podcast is funded by Mass Humanities, presenting a second year of Smithsonian Museum on Main Street, including a political trivia night May 21st at Mohawk Trail Regional School. Information at masshumanities.org/events.
To boldly go where no man has gone before.
I'm at the Amherst kitchen table of an alien. Wait a minute. Is that a mask?
No, this is not a mask. This is one of the files that have been released, and this is one of the evidence for aliens.
Oh, all right, Mr. Universe. It's really you, Dr. Salman Hamid, formerly of Hampshire College, soon to be teaching at the other remaining colleges in our area in the world of astronomy, and the head of Kainat Studios. You have a very classic-looking alien mask that you brought. You're also wearing your Roswell, New Mexico, looks like a Van Gogh painting t-shirt with a flying saucer beaming down into New Mexico saying, "Believe." This all because Friday, the Pentagon, the quote-unquote War Department, released a tranche of documents and evidence about UFOs, unidentified flying objects, /UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. Not as cool, but probably more accurate. What's your take on the files that were released this weekend? Did you spend the whole weekend looking at and learning about aliens?
No, because I knew we already had them. Remember, we have talked about aliens and the government claims for that for many years.
Yeah.
So here is what I would say. I mean, I think this is the president of the United States, who's the commander-in-chief as well. So he said, I mean, he truthed it as well.
Truth socialed?
But it is also on war.gov/UFO because it's now Department of War. But this is what he said. Whereas previous administrations have failed to be transparent on this subject, with the new documents and videos, the people can decide for themselves what the hell is going on, because that is capitalized. And so, okay, so that is the purpose of it. And I should mention that 162 files with hundreds of pages have been released. This is the first one, and it's going to be released periodically, regularly. In fact, I think once a week or whatever. Like
whenever they need to distract from the actual news going on in the world, there'll be another dump.
And there are some video files as well. And how can I say this? One of the saner tweets came from Margie Taylor Greene. I mean, she said that this is part of, look at this shiny object propaganda while the administration wages a foreign war. And then she says this is a quote, "Unless they roll out live aliens and test demo UFOs or actually admit what we know, I have to say, I have way better things to do on this Friday." Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is her skepticism.
I'll also add my favorite headline from the punk rock satirical news website, The Hard Times. Total backfire. The recently unclassified UFO files link Donald Trump to another massive pedophile ring, but in space. Because that's what people are thinking. I mean, like, the Iran war is not going well. Gas prices super high. He has still somehow managed to skirt the other tranche of documents that have been released, the Epstein files. So tying that in together with the Hard Times and Marjorie Taylor Greene. That being said, there were files and videos released.
Right. So let me, first of all, the way people talk about it, let me clarify this part. And Jared Isaacman, who was the head of NASA a couple of weeks ago, he said this: the odds that we will find something at some point to suggest that we are not alone are pretty high. Now, people go like, okay, so if you are skeptical of the UFO files, then you are saying that there are no aliens out there, the possibility of aliens. Mm-hmm. Those are two different things. And we have talked about it many times. So let me be clear about it, because again, Jared Isaacman was quoted saying that, well, a lot of the mission of NASA, or NASA's missions, have this as a core principle, like, or core motivation. Or is there any life elsewhere in the universe or not?
And we're doing like core samples on the moon or wherever. We're literally looking for dead cells that tell us life might have existed here at one time.
Or on Mars and things like that. So there is a difference between those two things. So if the NASA head says, well, the odds of finding something at some point to suggest that we are not alone is pretty high. Sure, I say the same thing. You can totally believe, and I would say this is a matter of belief, that there is life elsewhere out there. I certainly think there is. But there is a difference between that and asking the question, do we have evidence for life elsewhere in the universe? And so far, no. We do not have evidence for that. Are there claims that we have evidence for that? Yes. Are any of the claims scientifically accepted by a vast majority of scientists? No. Are there people who make claims that, for example, astronomer like Avi Loeb, that, hey, this was an alien spacecraft? Yes. Do scientists, majority of scientists, believe that or think that those claims are valid? No. So I just wanted to make it clear that these are factual claims. These are not, what I'm talking about is people can make real claims, people can be sincere about those claims, but the scientific body, as of today, does not believe that we have evidence for extraterrestrial life.
Did you look at those files that were released on Friday, and did anything pop into your mind that you hadn't seen before or was interesting to you in any way that would lend itself more towards the idea that this could be credibly viewed as intelligent life from another planet?
Okay, so again, you asked two different questions. First part, was there anything intriguing in it? Yes! I actually thought they were, because I went through, there are video files and...
That star-shaped one? That was wicked cool. But then there were half of them I looked at, I was like, I can't even tell what the heck why this is even interesting.
So here is the question, and in fact, amongst those files, they actually say there that the materials archived here are unresolved cases, meaning the government is unable to make a definitive determination on the nature of the observed phenomena. This can occur for a variety of reasons, including a lack of sufficient data, unquote. Are there things that are intriguing? Sure, yes. But does that mean that those are spacecrafts from another civilization and those alien technology? No. So there are a lot of things that we don't know what those are. It's not because those are alien spacecrafts. If you claim that those are alien spacecrafts, you have to show positively that those are alien spacecrafts rather than, hey, I don't know what that streak is. I don't know what those dots are. Hence, they are alien spacecraft. So there is a distinction between saying and thinking we don't understand something, because there could be many, many, many reasons why we don't understand something, versus I am positive that it is an alien spacecraft. Did anything that set up? I thought it was actually historically, it's really interesting that, for example, Buzz Aldrin, actually, there is a file in there in which he debriefed, and he says, well, he saw something of a sizable, and this is quote, object close to the lunar surface and a fairly bright light source. Okay, well, that's interesting. Others didn't see it. They didn't find any reason for that. What could it be? We don't know. So those things do happen in Apollo 17. They saw some 3 dots sort of in one of the pictures. Now remember, there are all these other Apollo missions. They didn't see anything, so that will be an interesting question. If those are really alien spacecraft, what did they do? Sleep through it when Apollo 12 went, or Apollo 14, 15, 16, and so on and so forth. So we see a lot of things that are not explained, and that is totally fine. And scientists in general are much more comfortable in saying, I don't know, because we don't know. There is a distinction between not knowing something versus because I do not know, hence it is an alien spacecraft.
When I have this fight at parties about aliens, which I do frequently, including with the brother of the person that we went to the movies with last Monday night, when we went to see Exit 8 at the late night show at Amherst Cinema, filmmaker Bob Kraskowski's brother and I end up at almost every party having a big debate about whether aliens exist or not. And I'm always saying, I believe aliens exist, but there is zero evidence that aliens exist. Depending on the intellectual bent of the person you're debating, it's fun to say, I saw those 3 dots in the sky. That was clearly angels. Or that was clearly Care Bears. You can insert anything in there, and it is as a valid and intellectual leap between we don't know what it is, so then it must be aliens. We don't know what it is, so then it must be angels. That we don't know what it is, so then it must be Care Bears. It's as likely that it's either of those 3 things, because there is no evidence as to what it actually is.
But I want to actually switch back to this conversation about why does it matter? And to me, there is actually a much more serious conversation behind that. One is even just critically looking at this. I mean, there have been hearings in the Congress, and there was one person, David Grush, 2 years ago. He actually had a testimony to U.S. Congress, and he says that I was informed of a multi-decade UAP, so unidentified aerial phenomena, crash retrieval and reverse engineering program,
Right.
to which I was denied access. And in fact, He said that this has been going on since 1930s, and in fact, Mussolini in Italy was the one who actually found a saucer that crashed over there, and then went to the Vatican, and the Vatican got it to the US, and hence we have that. Okay, now if all of that is true, which he claimed, then why are we just releasing these pictures of these faint objects, and we don't know what it is, 3 dots? So you cannot have it both ways, meaning to say that some people making a claim, as he is in front of the Congress, which, by the way, he himself did not see any of the alien bodies, but he claimed that they were bodies that retrieved, and he said those were biologics of non-human or non-earthly origins. So, first of all, there is this inconsistency. Again, we have to think about people who are making these kind of claims. If that was the case, then why is it all fuzzy, these kind of pictures, whereas somebody is already claiming that there are life we have already found? Why is NASA trying to find these microbes on Mars when we have bodies here already in place? So and so forth, right?
Yeah.
But that is not my major concern. My concern is, what is the impact of that for the public? We recently had a person who is number 2, I think, in FEMA. He's the head of Office of Response and Recovery, and he claimed that he had been teleported to a Waffle House.
Yeah.
And then he said actually he was that wasn't the word he would use. He would use the word translated or transported, which is not a new concept for people of faith. Okay, and he said in biblical context it had been happened, right?
Happened to Muhammad.
Right. So if that is the case, then now he is the head of Office of Response and Recovery. How would he respond to a situation? Would he respond to something if information comes to him that there is a flood warning? My concern comes in that people can believe in various things, and people do that, for example, for astrology. I mean, there is nothing wrong. I mean, I'm skeptical of astrology. Astrology physically doesn't work, and we understand why, and so on and so forth. But I also understand why people might believe in astrology, because it gives a bit of what is called an illusion of control. Life is hard, and there are a lot of different things we cannot predict. Well, maybe the position, the way stars are today, or when you were born, and so on and so forth, it gives you a little bit of control in your life. Mm-hmm. That's fine. I mean, fine meaning, it's up to you. You are making your marriage decisions or others, But remember, the reason why astrology, people used to believe in those things, was because life was uncertain, not just in terms of personal matters, but also in terms of the weather and in terms of fires. These were all random phenomena. And so astrology, the patterns of stars and so on and so forth, were used to predict, for example, fires in London, fires in Baghdad, or the weather pattern for all year round. Today, we don't use that, because we understand whether we can actually have predictions from satellites and so on and so forth. But human life is still complicated, and so we still cling on to astrology. And that is, if people want to have this way, that I want to use astrology to predict my life, that is okay. But would you be okay if your government officials are using astrology, for example, to formulate a response to a weather event that is coming up? Would you be okay if the head of FEMA, or the number 2 in FEMA, says, well, you know what, I would have responded to that, but the sun was right now in Capricorn, and you know what, that is actually not the most preferable thing to do. Mm-hmm. That is where the aspect lies, whether we would be okay in your government officials to make decisions based on things that the science, for example, does not corroborate.
Like, say, mass school shootings with thoughts and prayers.
Well, there is a parallel to that, yeah. So this is the reason why scientists are skeptical about these claims. And this is the reason why there is a debate, even when there are claims for microbes that have been the case, for example, in a meteoroid that came from Mars in 1996, I think, when President Bill Clinton made a statement, he says, maybe there is evidence of ancient life in this meteoroid, and then people tested, and now most scientists believe that no, that was chemistry, not biology, because it's a hard question. Now just think about that process. And so next time, those scientists, when they make a claim, you would trust them because you saw the skepticism of these big claims. And as Carl Sagan said, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Just because you see something you don't understand is not an extraordinary evidence. I think, and again, going to the impact part, you can see this stuff happening in NIH, the National Institute of Health, or your vaccines. Just this past week, they said that, well, shingles vaccine, they have removed, the suggestion was that it was safe. Now, under normal circumstances, under normal or previous administrations, you'd be like, I would have been concerned about it from the context, it's not safe. But because the way RFK Jr. has made so many different claims which go against scientific aspects, now I don't actually know regarding that because I have lost trust in a federal agency where scientists usually work and where scientists usually give an opinion. I'm like, I don't know. I think I'll still get the shingles vaccine, right? And that is in the health domain, which is far more important, for example, whether there is life elsewhere or not. But it's the same kind of process. So having these kind of statements coming from federal employees, having these kind of UFO claims, like, rather bypassing scientists, well, let people decide. It undermines the faith, the confidence in the process by which we understand the physical world. Scientists will keep on working the same way, but I think it's the trust of the public that will going to erode in the governmental institutions because they will keep on bypassing scientists and making claims regarding the UAPs, or just say, who knows? Well, we do know. And we don't know is a big answer of what we know. And it's okay to say, we don't know. That's where my rant is, Monty.
I love it. We don't know, and that's fine.
And now, fired up about voting and a significant lack of aliens coming up, we shift all that energy to feeding our neighbors.
Jody Falk of Rachel's Table is next to talk about their work and their Outrun Hunger 5K this Sunday.
You're listening to the Fabulous 413 on 88.5 NEPM.
Welcome back to the Fabulous 413. The mission of Rachel's Table of Western Massachusetts is to alleviate hunger and reduce the waste of food resources in Western Mass. Rachel's Table takes a holistic and collaborative approach toward food security by supporting an intergenerational volunteer effort to feed and nourish our local communities.
Initially created by members of the Women's Philanthropy Division of the Jewish Federation of Western Massachusetts to address food insecurity in the Springfield Longmeadow area in 1992, Rachel's Table has grown to serve Hampshire, Hampden, and Franklin counties, at times extending into the Hartford area.
Oh, we'll allow it, even though it's on the Fabulous 413.
They're primarily here.
Yeah, we love them. And we like Hartford, too. Hi, Hartford. 6 days a week, more than 200 volunteers collect food from local supermarkets, restaurants, caterers, and bakeries and deliver to more than 60 local organizations, including food pantries, community meal programs, after-school centers, shelters, and more. In addition, over 150 volunteers glean at local farms and bring over 70 partner agencies or affiliated networks or gardens with the part of their Growing Gardens program.
And this Sunday, May 17th, sees one of their biggest fundraisers return to Forest Park in Springfield. Outrun Hunger is a 5K run and a 1-mile fun walk. And with us to talk about this and all the things their organization does is Executive Director Jody Falk. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is an exciting organization that I have admired for many years now. But talk about how you first got involved with Rachel's Table.
Especially from dance.
Yes. Okay.
You went from dance to this.
I did. You're like, what? How does that happen? Well, the short story is there was the goal was, how do I help serve even deeper in greater ways? And this job came up, and I also myself was on WIC for some time with my son, who was young when he was young. And I knew what it was like to walk in the supermarket and say, I'm going to hide behind this this aisle so that nobody who I know sees me do this WIC thing. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, that's not okay. The stigma's not okay.
Yeah.
And also, hunger is much more prevalent than we like to believe that it is. And so, and it could happen to anyone. So I just, when this job came up and it was time for me to do a transition in my life anyway, this is where I came. And it was a part of the Federation at the time. We have now become our own nonprofit in 2023. And that was because the need grew so big, starting from the pandemic and never returning to pre-pandemic levels. And I thought, we all thought, the board and I and everyone, that we're serving so many people, we're doing so much, and we need to do it quickly and flexibly. So it's time that we stand on our own 2 feet. So that's been what we've been doing, standing on our own 2 feet, running on our own 2 feet, actually, because it hasn't stopped.
And running this Sunday and Outrun Hunger, a benefit for Rachel's Table.
Look at that
Sunday,
segue.
May
I love
17th.
it.
Oh, wow, yeah.
This
Segue
is why
can
you do what
drive
you
a
do.
truck through, as they say. The thing that I love most about Rachel's Table, though, is the way that you recapture food that would have otherwise gone to waste. And under your leadership, that has expanded dramatically. It must be a huge undertaking to coordinate that. So can you talk a little bit about how that gets so well coordinated so that the stuff doesn't go to waste, but then goes to where it can nourish people?
Yeah, thank you. So one of our 4 programs is rescuing food. And that is truly what happens is it could go to a landfill. You don't want it to go to landfill because that will be bad for the universe, for the gases that come out of landfills, especially from food, are not good. So we take food. So we have a number, over 100 different food donors, and we have 5 or 10 or even 15 drivers, volunteer drivers, every single day waiting for our volunteer dispatcher to call them and say, okay, you go to X, you go to Y, drive it to C, all the alphabet. So, and that's what they do, and it's 6 days a week, and it's because we don't want it to go to landfill, we want it to go to people, and it's still good food. Sometimes it's a vegetable that wouldn't get sold because it's not pretty. Like, it's really not so good reasons, to be honest. They're still good food. And it goes to, as you said, Hampton, Hampshire, and Franklin counties. And we're just delighted that we can do it. And it's within like a half hour. We're trying to do it quickly. It's called the last mile. Like, we're just getting it to that place where it's going to be distributed.
Talk about, I want to talk about some of the produce that Rachel's Table distributes, because you do it in kind of a twofold way. Like, you've got Growing Gardens, which is a program that you pioneered, but also Gleaning, which I think is super, super fun.
Totally cool.
And is a large portion of what you do. So can you talk about both of those? We'll start with Gleaning again, because I think Gleaning is really fun.
Yeah, Gleaning is fun.
If people don't know that word, can you explain what I mean?
I'll speak to. So these 4 programs: Rescue, Purchase, Glean, and Grow. Those are 4 programs, and altogether we did about distributed about 1 million pounds last year, which to your point, over 300,000 before when I was first getting there. So in any case, Gleaning is the harvesting of produce that will get tilled over, or the farmer no longer can sell or wants to change the crop over, and it's just going to sit there. Again, food that's sitting there that's still good, and hungry people should not exist in the same universe.
Right.
So we have, and the Gleaning program started, I think maybe 16, 17, maybe even 18 years ago. And it started first as an educational thing. Let's talk about land. Let's talk about food. Let's talk about what hunger is and why we have these beautiful farms here and still hungry people. It was really an important message. We're also trying to tell people that's what also Outrunning Hunger is, a chance to share what is going on in our universe, what's not right about it. So we still have those educational programs, but now, for the past 3 years or so, we've kind of jumped into this community gleaning program where the farmers continue to call us, and we're like, okay, 1:00 that day, here's the farm. Join us with your boots and your whatever, and we'll help you. So it's sort of like anybody who gets our alerts. So we went from 8 people went to a glean. Now we have hundreds of people, and we had. We first started, we had 8 gleans. We had 110, I think, gleans last year. And that is, we're all through season. The season's from July. Actually, no, we just started. We started gleaning a few weeks ago. So
wow,
May.
Gleaning this early. Yeah,
May.
I always think of it as a late summer thing.
No, it's May all the way through the very beginning of December.
What are you gleaning right now? Asparagus?
Well, yeah, and lettuce and things that are quite early crops.
And does somebody call Rachel's Table, and then a dispatcher says, hey, whoever's available, come right now, or come on Saturday, or how does it? Is that how it works?
So what we have is, especially with the community gleaning program, sometimes the farmers will call us, and we have our gleaning coordinator, who's amazing, Sarah, who's just, if you meet her on the field, you'll amazing, and we also reach out to farmers and tell people that we do this. So let us know about that. So we'll be setting up things, but the we got these things to pick in 2 days. That will be something the farm will tell us, and we will send it out. And believe it or not, it'll be gleaners even from Berkshire County come and bring it back. One of the best things I love about the gleaning program these days is this part of it is not just for our every week partner agencies, which we love working with. It's also for the informal mutual aid networks. It's also for people saying, in my community, there's this place where people leave food and people need it. So we say, take for yourself, take for your communities, and take for these partner agencies that we have. And we really kind of distribute the impact much wider.
We're speaking with the executive director of Rachel's Table, Jody Falk, about the work that Rachel's Table does week in and week out, and about their Outrun Hunger event this Sunday, the Race to Fill the Bowls, a 5K race and 1 mile fun walk at Forest Park in Springfield.
Why a run?
For hunger. It's not quite on brand, is it? And maybe we just walk through the fields. We actually thought about a gleaning fun, like a glean-a-thon or something. We were going to think through that. I need some brains to think through that.
I love
think
it.
through it with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
But so what's great about your question is that it started. I don't know how many years ago at this point, but it started because we have also a Rachel's Table teen board. We work with an intergenerational group of volunteers, some of whom are these youth, and they formed a group, and they do different events, and they do different service projects, and they learn about what food hunger is, and they try to advocate, and and this is one of their original events, is they started this race. So it was a kid thing at first. It was a teen thing.
That's fun.
And then it grew into it's a whole Rachel's Table thing. And so we have families and everybody. And really, truly, please come and register to either race, run, or just come to be there because it's really fun.
There's also virtual race options as well.
Yes.
So can you sponsor somebody who's running, or how does the virtual race option work?
That's just if you're sitting, at your home, if you decide, or you're somewhere else in the world, except you can't be there on this day. Actually, virtual option started during COVID, like every other virtual option. It started, and we did the whole race virtually at that point, which I was like, how do you people just do their own 5K and then clock it in? So you can do your own 5K and clock it in.
We talk about hunger a lot on this show, and we talked with Congressman McGovern about it. We
Yes.
talked a lot during the government shutdown when SNAP was not rolled out as planned. Did Rachel's Table see an impact of SNAP not going out as scheduled at the beginning of November?
Yeah, so we partner with many service agencies that do direct service. We're the ones giving them the food; they're the ones distributing it. So, except for gleaning and gardening is much more direct. But we had so many calls. Help us! We don't have food. Help us. We are not sure what to do, et cetera. So we stepped up our gleaning because it was right in November, right? And we were still gleaning. So we had maybe 3 gleans. Then we added to 5 to 6 gleans a week. We just made sure we can get as much food to people as possible, and good food, right? And then we also had a fund drive to help buy meat at that time for people, for our agencies. So we kind of did what we could to fill the food that was not there at the time, and to kind of, because people were also very afraid, and they'd go and they'd take what they can, and so the shelves were bare. We're getting bare, yeah.
Mm-hmm. If people are hearing about this and want to participate in not just the run, which we'll, before we sign off, we'll give you the details on that for Sunday again. But if they want to be a gleaner, or they want to be a dispatcher or a driver and want to help the mission of Rachel's Table that goes all over Hampshire, Hamden, Franklin counties, all these different partner agencies, 60 local organizations bringing this food that last mile, as you said, how do people start that process of volunteering for Rachel's Table?
Yeah, thank you. So we are really literally driven by our volunteers. It's sort of a pun, but it's the truth. And you go to our website.
I was going to make a lettuce pun.
Okay,
earlier.
there we go.
When there's lettuce to be gleaned, just let us know.
Okay, all right. Feedwma.org. I'm going to try to get that in there. FEED, like feed people, feedwma.org is our website. And it will say give food, give time, give money, or whatever. But give time is our volunteer portion of the website. You can learn all about it. We're always looking for volunteers.
And is it easy? You have to go through a training, or is it just like, you show up one day at a farm and start picking the lettuce?
Well, the gleaning is you sign up and there's a waiver and all this stuff, but you go. But to drive and dispatch, there's more of a training because that's a whole another. So we have all these different ways to do it, but very easy. We have a great volunteer coordinator, Megan, who's got your number, and it's great. Please.
Yeah, and if you're interested in a specific aspect that Rachel's Table offers, they have that too. Like you can sign up for those specific things that you're interested in.
I think that's great, and it's been exciting to see over the years how much this has expanded and how often you're able to make that food meet that last mile and get it to the places it needs to go.
Yeah.
It's something that shouldn't exist in this country, and yet
No.
it does. And Rachel's Table is doing great work here locally to make sure that people are having enough to eat. And one way to support them is this Sunday, Outrun Hunger. It's a race to fill the bowls, a 5K race and 1 mile fun walk at Forest Park in Springfield starting at 9 a.m. You can go to that same website, feedwma.org, and find out all the details on Outrun Hunger and how you can support the work of Rachel's Table. We've been speaking with their executive director, Jody Falk. Thanks for telling us about the great work that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Oh, it's awesome. And like always inspiring to go out in places and know that they're connected to you.
Yeah,
too.
or I'll hear people say, you know what, we got to call Rachel's Table about this. The word is spreading about the
Thank
great
you
work that
so
you're
much.
doing. On the next Fabulous 413, we'll celebrate pollinators with the folks from Bee Fest in Greenfield happening this weekend with Greenfield Business Association's Hannah Rechtstoffen, as well as Mr. G and Mrs. G. Discover some of the flora those bees love at Conway Natives with Lillian Jackman.
Blast the Fire conversation today got you fired up. We'll introduce you to Jesse Mechanic, author of the book Don't Be an Effing Marshmallow, an illustrated guide to revolution, and let you know how you can meet him in conversation with Layla Mushabek of Interlink Books this weekend.
Here's one of Mr. G's pollinating songs about a mariposa. I'm Monty Belmonte.
I'm Clee Smith. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the Fabulous 413.
Tú eres muy valiente, tú eres tan fuerte, señorita mariposa.
It is getting harder and harder to make ends meet in this economy. So people are doing what a lot of people do when that happens.
My husband, he told me, go to school.